fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story. On the distant planet of Zalara, where towering spires of crystal stretched toward an orange sky, the inhabitants were fierce warriors. The Zalarans were known across the galaxy for their battle prowess and unyielding strength. Their species was driven by honor, survival, and an ancient code that demanded they never show weakness. Among them was a young warrior named Kira, a fierce alien girl with razor-sharp claws, glowing teal eyes, and a heart as hard as the minerals that formed the planet beneath her feet. Kira had been on a mission to retrieve vital data from a human exploration vessel that had crash-landed on Zalara. She fought tooth and nail to protect her planet from foreign threats, but in the chaos of battle, she was injured. A sharp blast from a human weapon had torn through her side, leaving a deep gash that threatened her life. In a rare act of mercy, a human named Captain Eric had found her lying in a forgotten corner of the planet's terrain, her blood pooling in the dust. Eric was an explorer and scientist, not a soldier, and his mission was to study the planet's alien lifeforms. When he stumbled upon Kira, he could have easily ended her life, for the Zalara warriors were known for their ruthless tendencies. But something about the girl, her bravery, her fierceness, made Eric hesitate. With no time to lose, Eric did what he knew best. He treated her wound. He didn't have the advanced medical tools he had hoped for, but he had enough knowledge to stabilize her condition. He used his personal medkit, injecting a fluid that he had been studying for years, hoping it would work on an alien physiology. Kira had never experienced kindness before. Her people were strong, self-sufficient, and they never trusted outsiders. But as the human worked, his hands gentle despite his hardened features, something unexpected began to happen. The pain that had racked her body began to fade, and the sensation of healing, of care, filled her with an unfamiliar warmth. When Kira woke up, her surroundings were different. She wasn't in the battlefield anymore. She was in a makeshift shelter made from the wreckage of Eric's ship. The pain from her wound had subsided completely, and her senses felt off. She felt lighter, somehow, as though her entire being had undergone a transformation. She looked down at herself and gasped. Her once powerful and intimidating form was gone. Her sharp claws had softened into small, delicate paws. Her teal eyes, once blazing with the fire of battle, now glistened with uncertainty. She was smaller, furred, soft, like a kitten. Kira's first instinct was to fight, to rage against the helplessness she felt. But as she tried to move, her new body didn't cooperate in the way she expected. She stumbled awkwardly, her tail swishing behind her. The sharpness of her mind hadn't dulled, but her body, her warrior's body, had been replaced by something fragile, something vulnerable. Eric, who had been working on repairs nearby, turned to find the alien girl, no, the kitten, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. "What happened?" she asked, her voice softer than it had ever been. Eric smiled warmly, wiping his hands on a cloth as he approached. "You were injured. I healed you. The process may have changed your appearance, but I didn't think it would do that." Kira didn't know how to respond. She had been trained to never show weakness, to never let others see her in such a state. Yet, here she was, small, fragile, and utterly dependent on a human who had, against all odds, shown her compassion. Her pride was wounded more deeply than her physical injury. "Why did you help me?" she finally asked, her voice a soft whisper. Eric crouched down, his expression kind. "Because I don't believe in letting anyone suffer when I have the ability to stop it. You're not my enemy. You're a person, just like me." The words were simple, but they carried a weight Kira had never considered. In her world, enemies were always to be defeated, never understood. And yet here, with this human, she saw a different path, a way that was rooted in healing, in kindness, not in battle. The days that followed were a blur of adjustments. Kira, still in the form of a kitten, followed Eric around as he tended to the ship and navigated the strange terrain of Zalara. Her pride still burned, but she couldn't ignore the feeling of safety that Eric's presence gave her. Slowly, she began to understand the human way. She didn't need to fight to survive anymore. She had been shown a different way to live, a way that was more gentle, more compassionate. She found herself curled up at Eric's feet at night, her once untamable nature giving way to the warmth of his care. Kira had always believed that strength came from being fierce, from never yielding. But now, as she lay beside the human who had healed her, she realized that strength also came from vulnerability, from the willingness to trust, to let someone in. And for the first time in her life, Kira understood what it meant to be truly strong. Not through battle, but through compassion. Not through destruction, but through healing. And as she purred softly, her small, kitten body curled into Eric's lap, Kira knew that her life, her entire understanding of what it meant to be alive, had changed forever. She was no longer the fierce warrior of Zalara. She was something new. Something gentle, something whole. Fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story continued. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Kira and Eric grew stronger. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. It was something more profound. Eric's kind treatment had caused Kira to begin questioning everything she had known about her world. The very foundation of her beliefs had been cracked open, and in its place, something new began to form. Kira was still adjusting to her new, kitten-like form, the feeling of soft fur, the way her tail swished with every slight movement, and the overwhelming urge to curl up in cozy spots had been alien to her. Her once proud and independent warrior instincts had been replaced by a confusing blend of innocence and curiosity. Sometimes, she even found herself chasing after small objects, like the shiny rock Eric had dropped while working on the ship, just because they caught her attention. But through all of these changes, one thing was certain: she couldn't ignore the sense of peace that came with being near Eric. His calm demeanor, his patient voice, and the way he never treated her like a threat. He was a constant presence, one that made her feel safe for the first time in her life. Your people, the Zalara, are known for their strength and battle skills, right? Eric asked one evening, breaking the silence as he gently scratched Kira behind her ears. She purred, an involuntary reaction that made her feel both vulnerable and comforted. Yes, she answered softly, her voice still carrying a hint of that fierce pride. Strength is everything. We are born to fight. It is our way of life. Eric smiled, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. I get that. I really do. But strength doesn't have to come from violence or war. Kira, I think true strength comes from being able to protect and care for others, from choosing not to fight when you don't have to. Kira's teal eyes studied him intently. His words resonated with something deep inside her, though she wasn't quite sure what to make of them. She had spent her entire life training for war, believing that strength came from domination. Could there really be another way? One day, after a particularly long repair session on the ship, Eric took Kira to a nearby cave system. The caves were filled with luminescent plants, casting a soft glow on the surrounding rocks. It was peaceful, utterly different from the chaotic world Kira had once known. I've been thinking, Eric said as he sat on a rock, looking out over the quiet, alien landscape. You're not like the Zalarans I've read about. You're different. You're more than just a warrior. Kira padded up beside him, curling into a tight ball, her body now used to this odd, comfortable shape. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You have a different kind of strength, Eric replied. I see it in you every day. Even though you're no longer the warrior you once were, you still have the heart of a fighter. You fight for survival in a different way. You're learning to trust again, and that takes more courage than anything I've ever seen. Kira didn't respond immediately. Her thoughts tangled. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she was nothing more than a broken warrior. But deep down, she knew he was right. She had felt the change in herself, a shift she could neither fully explain nor deny. The following days were filled with small discoveries. Kira learned the human way of life from Eric, slowly adapting to the routines he had established in the wrecked ship. She began to understand the importance of peace, of quiet moments where nothing needed to be fought for, where survival wasn't about defeating an enemy but about working together. As the weeks passed, the bond between the two deepened. They learned to communicate without words, exchanging looks and small gestures that spoke volumes. Kira, despite her outward appearance as a gentle kitten, had not lost the sharp intelligence and cunning that had made her a fierce warrior. Eric noticed that, in her own way, she was still watching, still learning, and still adapting. Then, one day, the unexpected happened. A group of Zalara warriors, Kira's own people, arrived at the crash site. their sleek ships landing with the kind of precision only warriors like them could achieve. Kira's heart skipped a beat. She recognized them instantly. Her family, her comrades. The warriors were here to retrieve the wreckage, to reclaim their territory. But when Kira saw them, her first instinct was not to fight. She was no longer the warrior they knew. She wasn't sure what she was anymore. As the Zalara warriors approached, their eyes locked on her. The shock of seeing their once fierce comrade, now reduced to a soft, furry kitten, was evident on their faces. Kira stood frozen, not knowing how to explain herself. Kira, one of the warriors, a tall male with silver tattoos across his face, called out, his voice full of authority. What has happened to you? You were a warrior, what is this weakness? Kira's mind raced. She could feel the weight of her people's judgment pressing down on her. Her pride and fear both rose up in equal measure. But in that moment, she remembered Eric's words, strength wasn't always about fighting. Strength was in choosing the right moment, the right path. Kira looked up at Eric, who stood by her side. His expression was calm, unafraid. She realized then that he wasn't just her savior, he had become her equal, her partner. In a voice stronger than she felt, Kira spoke. I am not weak. I have learned something new. The Zalara warriors exchanged confused glances, their eyes narrowing. I may not be the warrior I once was, she continued, but I am still strong. I have chosen a new way to live, a way that values compassion, peace, and understanding. I no longer need to fight to prove my worth, and I will not return to the ways of violence. There was silence as her words echoed in the quiet of the alien landscape. The Zalara warriors looked at each other, unsure of how to respond. But Kira stood firm, her small body brimming with an inner strength that was unshakable. Eric stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. She's right. Strength doesn't always come from what you take. Sometimes, it comes from what you give. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate as the warriors processed what they had heard. Finally, the leader spoke, his voice low. We do not understand, but we will watch. Perhaps there is wisdom in what you say. Kira nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the choice she had made. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She had found a new strength, a strength that wasn't defined by her people, her past, or her warrior instincts. It was defined by her choice to live with compassion and understanding. And for the first time in her life, Kira felt free. Fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story, continued. The days that followed the encounter with the Zalara warriors were filled with uncertainty. The clan had left, taking their confusion and skepticism with them. But Kira remained in the quiet comfort of the wreckage with Eric. The human was patient, understanding her need to process everything. Though neither of them spoke much of the encounter afterward, it felt as though something had shifted irrevocably. Not just in Kira, but in the way the entire world had seemed to open up before her. Kira spent her time adjusting to her new reality. The gentle, unassuming life she was beginning to embrace seemed impossible to reconcile with her memories of fierce battles and hardened warriors. The fragility of her current form often left her frustrated, but over time, she learned to accept it. Sometimes, Eric would take her on walks through the strange, alien landscape, pointing out things she had never noticed before, the way the light shimmered off the alien flora, or how the wind carried the scent of unknown flowers that could heal wounds as surely as any medicine. One such afternoon, as they strolled through the vibrant, glowing meadows of Zalara, Kira paused to look at a strange structure in the distance, a cluster of towering crystalline formations that rose like spires from the ground. What is that? She asked, tilting her head. Eric followed her gaze, squinting slightly. That's one of the ancient ruins. It's said to be where the first Zalara warriors trained. I've never gone in, but I've always wondered what's inside. Kira felt a tug of old memories, those of her people, of their traditions and history. Something within her stirred. She had once believed that all she needed was to fight, to master the way of the warrior. But now, her curiosity was piqued. What would it mean to explore that past, not through battle, but through understanding? I want to see it, she said, surprising herself. There was no anger or urgency in her voice, just a deep curiosity about what she might discover within the ancient ruins. Eric gave her a surprised look. Are you sure? The Zalara ruins are a dangerous place. There are traps, old defense systems? I'm not a warrior anymore, Kira said quietly, but I still need to know. For myself. Eric hesitated, but seeing the determination in her eyes, he relented. All right, but I'll be with you every step of the way. The ruin stood tall before them, its structure both imposing and beautiful, like something crafted from both time and the elements. The air around it hummed with ancient energy, and Kira felt the weight of her people's history in every corner of the place. As they ventured inside, the light from the glowing plants outside faded, replaced by an eerie, silent atmosphere. Kira's eyes scanned the interior, her senses heightened. The long-forgotten hallways were lined with murals, etched deep into the stone, depicting the great warriors of old, their faces hard and unyielding. It felt like stepping into a place that both welcomed and rejected her. Eric, though cautious, followed closely behind. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking about what I've lost, Kira replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, and what I'm beginning to understand. As they made their way deeper into the ruins, they came across a chamber unlike the others, its walls decorated with intricate patterns and symbols that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it, a crystal that radiated a faint, otherworldly light. Kira's breath caught. She recognized it instantly, a relic of her people's past, a symbol of power and pride, the Heartstone. It was said that the Heartstone was a sacred artifact, a source of strength that had been passed down through generations of Zalara warriors. In the old days, it was believed to imbue its wielder with unmatched power and invincibility. But Kira no longer felt that desire. She wasn't drawn to it by the same hunger for dominance that had once driven her. Instead, she felt a strange connection to it, as though it were calling to her not for battle, but for something else. Eric stood back, sensing the weight of the moment. What is it? He asked, his voice respectful. The Heartstone, Kira murmured, her hand reaching out, not to claim it, but to feel the pulse of its energy. It's a symbol of our people's power. I used to think that strength came from something like this, something that could be held, controlled, and used. But now, I don't feel that way. She turned to Eric, the human who had healed her, who had shown her a different way of life. True strength isn't about what we can take or destroy. It's about what we can give, what we can build together. I don't need the Heartstone to prove my worth anymore. A long silence stretched between them. Eric, for his part, seemed to understand exactly what Kira was saying, even if her people might never accept it. Her journey had been one of transformation, not just from a fierce warrior to a gentle kitten, but from someone who believed in power through force to someone who valued peace and understanding. Kira took a deep breath and stepped away from the pedestal, leaving the Heartstone where it lay. She had no need for it. She had found her strength in a different way, in the quiet moments she had shared with Eric, in the lessons she had learned from her healing and growth. Let's go, Kira said, turning back to Eric. There's nothing here for me anymore. As they left the ruins, Kira felt a sense of peace that she had never known before. The Zalara warriors may never understand her choices, but she no longer needed their approval. She had found her own path, and for the first time, she was at peace with who she had become. The sun was beginning to set as they walked back to the wreckage, casting long shadows over the land. Eric glanced at her and smiled. You know, I think you've done something no one expected. You've shown that strength doesn't have to come from battle. Kira smiled back, her tail swishing gently behind her. Maybe strength comes from the quiet moments, from being willing to change, and from having the courage to choose something different. As the two of them continued on their way, the stars began to shimmer in the sky, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Kira, the fierce alien girl who had once been a warrior, was now something new, something softer, something wiser, and in her heart, she knew that her true strength had only just begun to bloom. Together with Eric, she would build a future not based on war, but on understanding, compassion, and the quiet power of a shared journey. And that, she realized, was the strongest thing of all. Fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story continued. The weeks that followed Kira's decision to leave the Heartstone behind were filled with more subtle transformations, both in her and the world around her. She no longer felt the overwhelming weight of her people's expectations pressing down on her. The once strict discipline of Zalara's warrior culture seemed like a distant memory. overshadowed by a new sense of purpose. Kira and Eric continued their life together, not as warrior and healer, but as two individuals who had both found peace in a chaotic world. Eric taught Kira more about human ways, how to read, how to communicate through technology, and how to make things with her hands. Though Kira's once immense physical strength had been reduced to the gentle motions of a kitten, her mind was as sharp as ever, and her thirst for knowledge was unquenchable. She was a quick learner, and Eric often found himself amazed by her adaptability. "You're something else, Kira," Eric would say with a smile, watching her piece together equipment he'd assumed was beyond her reach. "First, you're a fierce alien warrior, then you're this little kitten, and now you're turning into a tech whiz. I think you've got more skills than you realize." Kira, who had initially been uncertain about her new form, found comfort in the routine that was slowly becoming her new life. She no longer viewed her soft fur and delicate paws as a weakness. Instead, they became a reminder of what she had gained, a chance to explore a different kind of strength. She still had her sharp claws, her glowing teal eyes, and her ever-curious mind. But now, those traits were tempered with patience, humility, and an understanding of the fragility of life. But even as she adapted to her new existence, Kira knew the galaxy wasn't finished with her yet. The news of her transformation, of the once feared warrior becoming a peaceful soul, had traveled across the stars. Whispers had reached the ears of both allies and enemies. Some found her story a symbol of hope, others saw it as a weakness they could exploit. One day, as Kira and Eric were working together to repair a damaged piece of equipment outside their ship, they heard the unmistakable hum of a ship's engines overhead. Kira's ears perked up, and she stood still, her body tensing with the reflexive awareness that danger had arrived. The sound wasn't unfamiliar, it was the roar of an incoming Zalara warship. "Eric," Kira said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of concern. "My people, they're coming." Eric turned, wiping his hands on his shirt. "We need to hide. Fast." "No," Kira said, shaking her head. "I will face them." Eric's eyes widened. "Kira, don't be foolish. You're not the warrior you once were, and these Zalara, they won't understand what's happened to you. They'll only see weakness." Kira's heart raced, but her resolve held steady. "I've already faced their judgment once. I will face it again. I may not be a warrior in the way they expect, but I will show them the truth." With a determined step, Kira began walking toward the clearing where the ship was coming to land. Eric called out to her, but she kept moving, her small form carrying a quiet power that she hadn't felt before. This was her fight, not against them, but for her own right to be who she had become. The warship landed with a thunderous thud, sending up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured the surroundings. As the door to the ship opened, Kira's once familiar comrade stepped out. Their leader, the tall warrior with silver tattoos across his face, was the first to approach. Kira stood her ground, her eyes unwavering. She had never before felt so small in comparison to her people, but in this moment, she understood the significance of her choice, not just to leave the past behind, but to stand firmly in the present. "You've changed, Kira," the warrior leader said, his voice hard, but not without a touch of disbelief. "What is this? Where is the fierce warrior we once knew?" Kira didn't flinch. Her voice was steady. "The warrior you knew is still here, but I have chosen a different way. Strength is not found in war and bloodshed. It is found in understanding, in compassion, in knowing when to fight and when to choose peace." The leader's expression hardened, and a few of the other warriors murmured among themselves. Kira could see the judgment in their eyes, some pity, some anger, and others confusion. Her former clan did not understand her decision. In their world, a warrior who could not fight was as good as dead. "You have turned your back on your people's legacy," the leader said, his voice rising. "You disgraced the Zalara name." Kira felt a surge of anger, but she tempered it with a calm that surprised her. "I have not turned my back. I've simply chosen a new path, a path that leads to something greater than the endless cycle of battle. I will not be the weapon you want me to be. I will be something else." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Eric stood off to the side, watching with a mixture of concern and hope. He trusted Kira, and he believed in her strength even if her people didn't. Finally, the leader spoke, his voice low. "Then you are lost to us, Kira. You have betrayed your birthright." Kira's chest tightened, but she stood tall, her eyes never leaving the leaders. I have not betrayed anyone. I am still Zalara. But I am not a tool for destruction. I choose to live differently. The Zalara warriors seemed torn, exchanging uneasy glances. For a moment, Kira thought they might strike her down. But instead, they simply turned and boarded their ship without another word. The door closed behind them, and the engines roared to life once more, the ship lifting into the air with a thunderous noise. Kira didn't watch them leave. She didn't need to. She knew she had made her choice, and for the first time in her life, it felt right. The sound of the ship faded, leaving only the wind and the quiet of the landscape. Eric walked up beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You did it, Kira. You stood up to them. Kira nodded, her heart heavy but filled with peace. I didn't need their approval. I only needed my own. The journey ahead would not be easy. She knew there would be more challenges, more battles, both internal and external. But for the first time in her life, Kira felt ready to face them. And as the two of them watched the last traces of the Zalara ship disappear into the horizon, Kira knew that no matter what came next, she was no longer bound by the past. She was free. Free to create a new legacy, a new strength, and a new future, one built on understanding, compassion, and the courage to be herself. And with Eric by her side, she was ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. Fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story continued. The departure of the Zalara warship was not the end, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. As Kira and Eric stood side by side in the quiet aftermath, they both understood that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but they also knew that whatever came, they would face it together. Life gradually returned to a new normal. Days were spent repairing the wrecked ship, learning more about human technology, and sharing stories from their vastly different worlds. Kira had grown attached to the routines they had created, small moments of peace that were so different from her violent past. The wreckage of the ship had become their home, a symbol of both survival and rebirth. But Kira's thoughts often wandered to the stars, to the distant reaches of the galaxy where her people might still be searching for her. She hadn't seen the last of her kind, and while part of her longed to reconnect with them, she knew that any reunion would be complicated. They might never understand her choice, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. One evening, as Kira gazed at the horizon where the twin suns were setting, casting a soft orange glow over the barren landscape, Eric joined her. He was always the one to stand quietly beside her, offering his support without needing to say a word. I wonder what they're doing now, Kira murmured, her voice soft. The Zalara. I mean, do they miss me? Or do they simply see me as a traitor? Eric, who had grown to understand the complexity of Kira's emotions, didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed a hand gently on her back, offering her a sense of grounding in the midst of her swirling thoughts. They may not understand now, but they will. People change, Kira. Sometimes it just takes time. She turned to face him, her teal eyes reflecting the fading light. Do you think they'll ever come back? To try to force me to return with them? Eric hesitated. I don't know, but I don't think you should worry about that right now. You've done something extraordinary, and even if they don't understand, you've made your choice. That's what matters most. Kira nodded, but her mind remained restless. There was a part of her that wanted closure, a sense that the door to her past was truly closed. She had left her old identity behind, but that didn't mean the Zalara would let her go so easily. As if on cue, the communication system on the ship beeped to life, drawing both of their attention. Eric immediately moved to the console, his eyes scanning the incoming message. His expression shifted from curiosity to surprise. What is it? Kira asked, sensing his sudden shift. It's a distress signal, coming from another Zalara ship, Eric said, his voice thoughtful. It's faint, but it's definitely from a ship that's been damaged. They're requesting assistance. It could be a trap, or it could be genuine. Kira's heart skipped a beat. A part of her wanted to ignore the signal, to let the Zalara solve their own problems. But another part of her, one she couldn't quite silence, felt compelled to help. We can't just leave them, she said, her voice firm, her eyes alight with purpose. If they need help, I'll go. Eric frowned, clearly concerned. Kira, if it's a trap. I don't care, she interrupted, shaking her head. I'm not the same warrior I used to be, but I am still Zalara. If I can help them, I will. Eric stared at her for a long moment, searching her face. Finally, he nodded. All right, let's go. But we'll be cautious. We don't know what we're walking into. Together, they readied the ship, Kira making adjustments to the equipment while Eric worked on getting the coordinates. The ship hummed to life as they powered it up, and soon they were flying through the vast emptiness of space, heading toward the distress signal's origin. As they neared the source, Kira's heart pounded in her chest. The ship was smaller, drifting in the cold vacuum of space with a hull that had clearly seen better days. There was no sign of immediate danger, but Kira's instincts told her to stay alert. Do you think this is a trap? Eric asked, glancing at Kira, who remained silent for a moment. The faint glow of the damaged ship illuminated her face, casting her features in soft shadows. I don't know, she replied, her voice steady, but I'm not afraid. I can't let fear stop me from doing what's right. They docked the ship carefully, and as the airlock opened, Kira's senses went on high alert. The interior of the damaged ship was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the remaining life support systems. There were no signs of immediate life. The ship's crew was either unconscious or, Kira didn't want to think about it, dead. They moved cautiously through the narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Then, they heard something, a soft, strained voice coming from a nearby room. Kira stepped forward without hesitation, her movements slow and deliberate. As they entered the room, she froze. There, slumped against the wall, was a lone Zalara warrior, badly injured but still alive. The warrior's eyes flickered open as they approached, recognition lighting up his features. Kira? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Yes, Kira said softly, kneeling beside him. I'm here. The warrior's eyes widened with disbelief, and for a moment, he seemed to struggle with the reality of her presence. You're alive, Anne. I'm alive, she repeated gently, and I'm here to help. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. But you've changed. The warrior you were. How is this possible? Kira smiled faintly, her gaze steady. I've changed. Yes, but I'm still Kira. I still care about my people, even if I no longer walk the same path. The warrior's breath hitched, and he reached out weakly, touching her arm. They will not accept you. Kira, you've betrayed everything we stand for. I haven't betrayed anything, she replied quietly, her voice calm. I've found a new way, one that doesn't require war, a way that values life, peace, and understanding. Eric, standing a few steps away, had remained quiet throughout the exchange. Now, he stepped forward, offering a small device. We can help you. We'll stabilize your injuries and get you back to the station for proper care. Kira turned her attention to Eric, and then back to the Zalara warrior. There was no immediate answer, only the faintest flicker of a possibility. This warrior was different. He wasn't the leader of the Zalara, but his eyes reflected the same conflict Kira had once felt. Could there be others like him who were willing to embrace a new way? The warrior nodded weakly. If I survive, I will carry your message. Maybe we have been wrong, but not all of us will understand. Kira helped him as best she could, alongside Eric, using the limited supplies available to stabilize his condition. Together, they lifted him into the ship's medical bay, preparing for the long journey ahead. As they left the damaged Zalara ship behind, Kira stood at the ship's window, looking out into the endless void of space. She didn't know if this would change anything for her people, but she knew one thing for certain: she had taken another step on her path. She was no longer bound by the chains of her past, but now, she was a bridge, a symbol of what was possible when one chose to live with compassion instead of conquest. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to spark a change across the stars. Fierce alien girl transformed into a gentle kitten after a human healed her wound. HFY sci-fi story continued. The journey back was long and quiet. The injured Zalara warrior, whom Kira had helped stabilize, remained unconscious for most of the trip, but she and Eric tended to his needs, offering what little care they could. The ship hummed steadily through space, the stars outside offering a quiet, distant reassurance. As they neared the nearest Zalara station, a massive, fortified outpost on the edge of the sector, Kira found herself reflecting deeply on what had just happened. She had chosen to help, despite everything, despite the doubts that filled her. It wasn't about her, or her past. It was about showing that even in the face of adversity, one could choose a path of kindness, understanding, and a willingness to heal. The station loomed ahead, its immense metal surface gleaming under the light of distant stars. Kira felt her heart race as the ship neared the docking bay. This was it, the moment she would face the truth of her people's judgment, and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to bridge the divide. As the ship docked and the airlock sealed, Kira stood up, looking down at the Zalara warrior who had been brought to safety. He was still unconscious, but his breathing had steadied. Eric came up behind her, his voice low. "You don't have to do this. You know, we can leave. No one here is expecting you." "I know," Kira said, her voice soft yet firm, "but I need to see if there's a chance for them to understand. I can't live with the idea that I never tried." Eric gave her a supportive nod, his eyes filled with both admiration and concern. "Just be careful. Not everyone will be as forgiving as he was." Kira offered him a small smile. "I've learned to face the unknown before. It's just one more step." The airlock door opened with a hiss, and they stepped into the bustling corridor of the station. The Zalara outpost was a formidable place, an industrial hub that hummed with the activity of warriors, engineers, and scientists, all working together in the shadow of the Zalara Empire's military might. As they moved deeper into the station, Kira felt the weight of memories pressing in on her. The cold, calculating gaze of her people, the fierce warriors who believed in nothing but strength and dominance, seemed to follow her with every step. They were watching her. "Stay close," Kira told Eric quietly, her gaze scanning the surroundings. "This place is full of eyes that may not be friendly." They moved quickly but cautiously, making their way toward the medical bay where the warrior would be treated. When they arrived, the medical staff immediately took over, moving the injured Zalara warrior to a bed. The place was sterile, efficient, nothing like the warmth of Eric's humble ship or the wreckage they had called home. One of the station commanders, a tall Zalara female with sharp, angular features and silver markings across her face, approached them. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw Kira. "You," she said flatly. "I didn't expect to see you here." Kira stood tall, meeting the commander's gaze with unwavering calm. "I've come to help," she said simply. The commander's lips curled in disdain. "Help? You? After all you've abandoned? After turning your back on everything that makes us strong?" Kira felt the sting of her words but remained steady. "I haven't abandoned anyone. I've simply chosen a different way. The way of compassion, of understanding. Strength doesn't have to be measured by violence. There's another way, one where we don't have to destroy to survive." The commander's eyes flickered with disbelief, then contempt. "You are a disgrace to our kind. You were once a warrior, one of the strongest among us, and now you," she spat the words out, unable to finish the sentence. Eric, standing beside Kira, stepped forward slightly. "We're not here to fight," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Kira saved this warrior's life. If you want to help your people, maybe start by seeing that there's more to strength than just battle." The commander looked at Eric, her gaze hard. She wasn't used to hearing such words from anyone, least of all a human. But she said nothing, her stare lingering for a moment before she turned her back and walked away, leaving them in tense silence. Kira exhaled, relieved that the confrontation had ended without violence. But she knew that wasn't the end of it. The Zalara would not forget her defiance so easily. Hours passed as the injured warrior recovered. When he finally regained consciousness, Kira was by his side. His eyes flickered open, and for a moment, there was only confusion. Then recognition came, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Kira," he rasped. You really did come back for us." Kira nodded, her expression soft. "I couldn't just leave you to die. I've chosen a different path now, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten who I was, or where I came from." He seemed to consider her words carefully, his brow furrowing in thought. "The others, they won't understand. They won't forgive you." "Maybe," Kira said, her tone gentle. "But that's not my burden to carry anymore. I've done what I feel is right. I've chosen peace, even if it means being an outcast. I hope, one day, you will understand that there is strength in that too." The warrior closed his eyes, his expression mixed with a deep, conflicting sorrow. "You've changed," he whispered, "but perhaps you're right. Perhaps there is a new strength in you." Kira smiled, though it was bittersweet. She knew this was only the beginning. She hadn't come here to convince the entire Zalara Empire of her way of life, she had come to help. To offer something that was different. Something that might plant a seed of change in even one soul. If she could do that, if she could help just one person see the power of kindness over brutality, then it would be enough. As the warrior rested, Kira stood at the window of the medical bay, looking out at the vastness of space. The stars shimmered in the distance, as far and as endless as her journey. She had no illusions. There would be more battles to face, more moments of rejection, and perhaps even more moments of acceptance. But she was no longer the same person she once was. She had learned that her strength did not come from the battles she fought, but from the choices she made. And in the quiet of the station, she realized that she was at peace with those choices. Eric stood next to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said softly. Kira turned to him, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I hope so, but even if they never understand, I've made my peace. That's all I can do." The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding, and as the two of them stood there, together in that quiet moment, Kira knew that whatever happened next, she had already won. Not through battle, not through force, but through the power of choosing peace, and the courage to live by it. The stars ahead twinkled brightly, and Kira couldn't help but feel that perhaps, someday, the galaxy would shine just a little bit brighter because of the path she had chosen.